Well, good morning, Northview. How y'all doing this morning? It is so good. Woo! It is so good to see you guys this morning. It's great to be connecting with everybody watching online. Welcome to week number 2 of our series called This Great Adventure. We are going to be in Acts chapter 2. So if you want to have your Bible or Bible app open, that's where we will be. Last week, just wanted to recap real quick what an incredible weekend we had. First week of this series, just really made an intentional effort to call people to respond, to accept Jesus as Lord, to be baptized. And we had over the course of the morning 14 people who responded and took that step of faith. It was awesome to watch it. We had people in every service getting baptized. But one of my lasting memories from the day happened after all the services were done and I was getting ready to leave, and I passed back through the area over here to my left behind the baptistry. And the carpet back there, it was just soaked. Just a gigantic puddle of water and wet spot in the carpet. And I stopped and looked at it and I was like, that is like the holiest wet carpet that I've ever seen. Like, that is such a cool picture of what happened this morning. The aftermath of all that was wild. And it was so fun to watch people whose hearts were being stirred, almost like as if fanned into flame. They were burning hot in that moment to respond to Christ. And I couldn't help but think about how valuable this next conversation was going to be to them, because everybody who takes the step of faith to receive Jesus as Lord, you're burning hot, you're there, and you're ready to really live for Christ. You've got to take a step intentionally to connect yourself to relationships, to a church family, or else you run the risk of being like a hot ember or a coal or a piece of charcoal that's on a lump that's burning in fire and everything, and you separate one out. And what happens? You pull one off of the pile, and it'll burn hot for a bit, but slowly this fade starts to happen. And if you were to reconnect, what would happen? It would start to be fanned back into flame. It would get hot again if you pulled it off. And what I've watched as a pastor over the years is that this is the story of many people's faith, where they try to live their relationship with Jesus literally as a me and Jesus type thing. And you were never meant to walk alone. You were never meant to do faith alone. And that's why in this journey that we identify through 4 letters, A, B, C, D, accept, belong, contribute, disciple, the step after receiving Christ, the B step, is called belong. And it's all about finding your place relationally in the family of God, in the family of God. Now, I understand that sometimes we don't feel like we belong. You ever felt like you don't belong? That's not a fun place to be. It's tough. It's emotionally tough. It's awkward. You remember like not being picked on the playground in grade school? Oh, that hurts. That hurts. Or maybe it's this, like you go to a gym to work out and you stand and you look at a machine and you're like, is that for your legs or is that for your arms? You feel like maybe I don't belong here. You take me to a fancy restaurant, and if it starts to get too fancy, I start to really feel like I'm out of my depth, like completely out of my depth. I've been able to have some really nice food. I don't know that my palate has ever been able to really appreciate some of the things that I had. I've had steaks that are north of $100, and my tongue just can't appreciate what I'm eating. Now, I know some of you are like, well, you haven't had the right one. Let me show you or tell you about the right one. To which I'll say, take me out anytime you want. And you can prove to me that whatever that is the right one. I will gladly say this is the best steak I've ever had if you want to buy it. I remember being on an airplane one time when one of our kids was just not having it and crying and nearly screaming crying. And that is such an unnerving place to be as a parent. It's also an unnerving place to be as a passenger. And all I remember thinking is, we don't belong here. We don't belong here. And I think everybody on the plane was also thinking, you don't belong here. You don't belong here. Maybe it's somebody's having a conversation about a movie, or a group of people are talking about an experience that they had that you didn't have, and you just feel like you're not really able to contribute, like there's something that somebody else has, but you have never had it. Many people feel that way about church. They feel like they don't have a sense of belonging. They don't have a relational connection where they feel welcomed and they feel at home. Maybe some of you who are sitting here today feel that very same way. Let me just tell you, if that's you, that my hope, my goal for today is that you would be convinced and compelled that you do belong here and that there's a place for you relationally, and that you'd be compelled to step across the threshold, maybe put yourself out a little bit to be able to reach out and connect to a family here at Northview, that you would launch into the depths of relationship and experience community and the kind of life growth that can only happen in community. Following Jesus has always been a community experience. It's always been the intention. You were made for it. You were made to experience this through the church. The church was an idea of God, not yours and mine, but an idea of God to be able to unify a group of people who are very different. What's cool is with common faith in God, we can be together even when we are so different. Different races, different backgrounds, different makeups, different lots of things, because we have a common lordship in Jesus. That's what ties us all together. That's what can unite us together. I've had this experience growing up where I would say one of the most special gifts that I've been given by God over life is I've gotten to experience life in the church and experienced relational connection in the church in a way that was truly a gift. I've said this before. I think I fell in love with the church before I even fell in love with Jesus. I was raised, my life has been changed. My life has been changed because my mom and dad found a home in a local church. Because my mom and dad found a relational home at a little church in Keokuk, Iowa. My life was changed. My network of relationships, if I was to think back on my childhood, I bet the number is 75%. It might be north of 90% of everything I remember and the network of the relationships that I have as a child are tied to a little church on Hilton Road in Keokuk, Iowa. It was family. I remember times when you go, where's Dad? Well, he's helping somebody move. A bunch of guys went over to help this family that just came to town, and they're helping them unload. Or he's over helping with another guy. They're trying to help this older lady at the church. She's got a dryer that's not working, and they're fixing it. They're going over to fix it. Or I'd see food, cookies, or some sort of casserole, or something that just was appealing to me sitting on the counter, and I'd go to reach for it, and Mom would go, no, that's not for you. That's not for you. And you go, what do you mean it's not for me? Why'd you make it then? Well, that's for this other family that we're going to take this to later tonight because they had a surgery and we're just doing this to love on them. It was the church. It was the life of the church. It was community. It was family. That's why when I was in 8th grade, we moved 2 hours south to a new town in the St. Louis area. And I was convinced, I think maybe we all were, that we'd never find anything like that again. But you know what? We moved to a new city. And we found in O'Fallon, Missouri, a church where we could belong relationally. And some of the same things that we experienced in Iowa, we experienced in Missouri. I went to college in southwest Missouri, Joplin. Outside of Joplin, there was this little bitty town called Oronogo. And I mean little bitty town. But out there in this little bitty, nothing of a town, there was a church that had just exploded in growth. And I found my way into it. It's the first time that I'd ever been to a church that felt like it was a movement. Like it was a church that things were just happening. Like I'd only been in a little church, small church, couple hundred people. This was like 1,000 people. And it was music like I'd never heard before. And you didn't have to wear a suit in church. And it was like, you can do this? Like I didn't even know this was allowed. Like I didn't know this is great. And it was big and it was like beyond me. And yet I was able to be connected relationally. And I learned that it doesn't matter how big it is, that hospitality is a culture. Relationships can be found even in large environments. It's always about people who go out of their way to make someone feel welcome and for other people who receive that welcome and be bold enough to take a step in. We left after Jamie and I got married and we moved to California, Sacramento. Before that, I should say, I pastored for several years on the weekend at a little church in rural Missouri. I went from this larger church my freshman year of college. Starting my sophomore year, I got an invitation to preach at a church in a town of 40 people. No joke. No joke. 40 people. It was an unincorporated village called Dederick, Missouri. And it was deader than a doornail when it came to, like, there was no amenities, none. It was this little bitty blip between two small towns. But they invited me and they paid me $100 to drive an hour and 10 minutes to preach, and then an hour and 10 minutes back. They paid me every week to come and do it because it was all they could afford. And I found community there. They loved us. When Jamie and I got married, they threw a shower for us. When we got ready to leave to go to a full-time job in California, they sent us off. We get to California, we're in the urban area. We're Sacramento. We're just a mile off of downtown. Right across the street from the Arco Arenas where our apartment was, where the Sacramento Kings were playing at that time. Totally different environment than anything I'd ever been in. And yet I found the church. I found people. I found a family there. People that I still could connect with today. We moved from there after our internship to Illinois. And for 6 years lived part of a journey that is hard for me to even put into words how impactful it was for us as a young couple. The relationships that were there, it's 45 minutes away from the town I grew up in Iowa. So it was some of the old relationships being rekindled, some new ones started. Again, a church that felt like a movement that was beyond anything we could control, we got to participate in, and yet we found family. I left because I felt God calling me to be a lead pastor, to preach and teach more regularly. And we moved to Spokane, Washington, another totally different group of people. It was unbelievable. And we found family. In fact, when I left there, I said, I will never be loved by a church more. In fact, I hope I could love the next church like they've loved me here. And then I came to Danville, and I had to take back everything I ever said about no church could ever love us better, because we've experienced family. Not just weekend crowds and experiences, but people that know us and walk with us, and people that we know and we walk with. We do life together. What I've noticed about all of these locations all over the country is that there are a couple really, really common denominators that tie them all together. And I think this is helpful for us because any church that would want to experience something like that, I think should pay attention to. Number one common denominator was that in all churches, Jesus undeniably was Lord. He was set up as Lord, God, leader, guide, director. It was all about Jesus at every location. The second thing, though, was this. Every church lived out community like the first church did in the book of Acts. That's why I had you turn to Acts chapter 2, because we get one of the most amazing pictures in Acts chapter 2 of what community life in the church, where people not only are saved by Jesus, but now find their place to belong relationally together. It's in Acts chapter 2, verse 42. It says this, they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching, to the fellowship, to the breaking of bread, and to prayer. And everyone was filled with awe at the many wonders and signs performed by the apostles. All the believers were together. They had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. Every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes. They ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. And the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. This is one of my favorite places in the Bible to go to, because I love the picture that it paints, because it's the vision of what we're trying to create here. No matter how big we get on a Sunday, this is always the vision that we're trying to reach for on all the other days of the week, where we experience church and life together as a family together. Now, I've noted, and this is one of the things that I've always appreciated as a pastor, is how Acts 2:42 followed Acts 2:41. I know that's a genius thought. Acts 2:42 follows Acts 2:41. But Acts 2:41 is the birth of the church, and what it records is 3,000 people became followers of Jesus in one day. 3,000 people baptized in one day. The next verse, verse 42, is where we got into what we just read. And they devoted themselves to the teaching and the breaking of bread and to prayer and to fellowship and community and everything we just read. We went from massive conversion moment to immediate connection into smaller expressions. That's what I'm saying at 241 is both, chapter 2, verse 41 is both a pastor's greatest day in ministry and most sleepless night in ministry. Greatest day and most sleepless night, because you got all these people that you're now responsible for. But it's almost like the guys didn't blink. Because immediately we've got small groups, smaller expressions, eating together, praying together, teaching, doing life together, serving together, worship together. It's right there. I would say that the day of Pentecost and the immediate aftermath was the disciples' Mr. Miyagi moment. It saddens me that this reference is going over heads right now. There was almost like a little groan that happened right now. There's some people that need to be educated today, when you go home, because it's one of the greatest movies of all time. But the moment that Daniel submits himself to the tutelage of Mr. Miyagi, there's a lot of friction between the two, because Daniel wants to learn karate. And Miyagi's going to teach him karate, but he's not teaching him in the way he thinks he's going to be taught. He feels like he's doing all these odd jobs, right? You remember wax on, wax off, paint the fence. And he's like, when am I going to get to karate? And Miyagi realizes that he's about to lose his student, that he's not seeing what he's doing. And so what happens? You remember the scene? Miyagi starts to lunge at him and attack. And Daniel realizes that all these moves that he's been learning are all tied to moves that he could use in karate. And a light bulb goes on. And he realizes that old dog was teaching me the whole time. I didn't even catch it, but he was teaching me the whole time. The disciples had to have thought the same thing, because they had just done life with Jesus for 3 years. Don't forget that Jesus spent 95% of his time with 12 guys. I know he had crowds, and I know he had moments where he engaged in large scale, but almost all of his time was devoted to just these few guys. And he taught them the keys to authentic community, and that's why they knew what to do when they had a crowd. Because for 3 years, they had seen what Jesus did. Jesus said in Matthew 4:19, come follow me, and I'll make you fishers of men. Remember, that was the promise that he invited to those guys? Come follow me, make me your leader. I'll transform you, I'll make you fishers of men. I'll put you in, send you into mission in life. How did he make good on that promise? By shaping them day in and day out through relationship. They went everywhere together. And so their classroom wasn't really a classroom, it was life. It was life. They got to see a living picture of what faith looks like. They got to ask questions when they were confused. They cared for each other. They got to practice their faith. Jesus would have moments with these guys because they had relationship where, like, Peter walks on water. Remember the story? And then he kind of gets doubt. He's scared, and he starts to sink, and Jesus reaches down, pulls him back up, and what's the words Jesus uses? Oh, you have little faith. For the longest time, I think I've imagined that it was a scolding. Oh, you have little faith. Let me get you out of here. I don't know what that tells you about my view of God when I was growing up. But the more that I've read this and the more that I've walked, I'm nearly convinced that he said it with a grin from ear to ear as he reached his hand out to Peter. Oh, you have little faith. I can't believe you got out of that boat and walked. I'm so proud of you, but you got some steps still to learn. Let me pull you out. With Philip, he says, Philip, this is right before the feeding of the 5,000. How much would it cost to buy everybody some bread? Philip flips out. He's the money guy. He's like, 8 months' wages wouldn't be enough to buy everybody one bite. Jesus, don't even think about it. He did that to test him because he has a relationship with him. He can invite him into a journey. So the disciples used the same small group method that Jesus used to disciple the first Christians. Same thing. What I'm saying is, I think missed often when we look at Jesus and his life, we look at his ministry, we look at his message, but I think often we overlook his methods. And we forget that his methods are just as inspired as his message. And if this is the way that he used his influence over 12 guys to help shape them in a way that would affect all of us in this room and reshape eternity for millions and millions of people, how much more would he want to do it here, now, again? So when we invite people to take a step to belong here at Northview, I want to clarify that what we mean by that is we're inviting people to step out of just coming on a Sunday morning and get into a group that's 3 to 20 people. 3 because 2 is a date, 3 is a group. Jesus used 12. He just recruited 12, so like 20 probably starts to push the edges of what you could call a group and isn't becoming a crowd, right? Somewhere in that range. And when we say get into a group of 3 to 20 people, what are we trying to kind of make happen in that group? Well, it's straight out of what we read in Acts chapter 2. It's their playbook. Here it is. We'll put it on the screen. Just like the first church did, these groups apply God's word together. They eat together. They pray together. They support one another. They're generous together. Serve together. Worship together. They make room for one more together. This is what the church has been doing for a couple millennia. And every time a church gets back to this practice, people start to feel like a church is a family. I want to invite you to take that step. I want to invite those who already feel like Northview is their family to help make room for more people to take that step. Because while we're not experiencing quite what the day of Pentecost numbers were, we're seeing an incredible movement of God every weekend right here in our midst. And the goal is never simply just to get people in the waters of baptism. That's meant to be the launch pad. There's so much more that God has in store for them and for us, but it fits into this conversation of belonging. It's time to become together what God has called us to be. Ephesians chapter 2, this is the Message translation. I've always loved this as it relates to finding your place in the church. It says, you're no longer wandering exiles. This kingdom of faith is now your home country. You're no longer strangers or outsiders. You belong here with as much right to the name Christian as anyone. God is building a home, and he's using us all, irrespective of how we got here and what he's building. He used the apostles and the prophets for the foundation, and now he's using you, fitting you in brick by brick, stone by stone, with Christ Jesus as the cornerstone that holds all parts together. We see it taking shape day after day. A holy temple built by God, all of us built into it, a temple in which God is quite at home. I look out every weekend at a crowd, three crowds, in fact. And while I love Sundays and I love what this is, I also understand the limitations. I understand that this is not a relational environment. This is a monologue, not a dialogue. And I'm grateful for that, honestly, because in this moment, dialogue is weird. If you guys start talking back, it's weird. But there's a place for dialogue, and we grow through dialogue. We grow through relational connection. So what is it that keeps a lot of us from taking the step to belonging? If I could identify quickly in the time that I have left, 3 that I see over and over and over again. Maybe you find yourself one of these specifically, is the obstacle that's keeping you. And maybe I can encourage you to step over it. The first one is this. Number 1 obstacle to belonging that I've witnessed is availability. Availability. Everybody's too busy. Got a lot going on. It's hard to fit it into the schedule. To take time, you're already taking time on a Sunday. And I do want to pause and say this. There are many here in the room who coming on a Sunday on a regular basis, like you're doing this for the first time in your life, and that's been a life-changing experience. I don't want to diminish one bit for those of you who this has been a new thing for you to even come on a Sunday on a regular basis. I want to applaud you for that. But I want to invite you to the next step, beyond a Sunday. But often we go, I'm just too busy. There's too much going on. Nobody has time. But here's the thing that I've found. Nobody has time, but everybody always seems to make it to the third practice of the week in Noblesville at 7:30 on a Thursday. Am I right? And people will say, oh, it's a busy season. And busy seasons do happen. And seasons in life sometimes do have some level of interruption to community. But seasons last about 3 months, and then they change. So if you've been using the season language, but season has been 3 years, it's not a season. It's that your life is booked too tight. And perhaps it's that priorities aren't lined up, because we always seem to find the time for the things that we value the most. Availability not only is about you stepping into a group, but it's also about you being available to other people and to their situation and to their story. One of the cool things that God has done in our midst over the years is he's invited people to understand it's not just what God has done for me, but it's how can I now in turn be a part of this story for somebody else. Not just can I be someone who is taking, but how can I be a part of sharing with somebody else? Availability is a big obstacle. So is this next one, number 2, authenticity. The fear for many is if I get in a group, it's like the mask comes off. And so this kind of make-up version of myself that I can kind of hold and put together on Sunday doesn't have to get exposed. And there's fear, because you fear, like when people get to know me, they're going to figure out I'm weird. But everybody's normal till you get to know them. You know, one of the cool things about small group is you start to meet some people and you're like, you do what? You're that guy? Oh, I love that. I love that. I've never, you're bringing people together that aren't the same. We are a little different. Maybe you fear, man, if I'm in a group, people are going to figure out that I'm messed up. I'm messed up. So I stay away from deeper relationships because I don't want people to know that. Can I just kind of level the playing field if that's you? And understand that all of us missed the mark. All of us have been train wrecked by sin. Nobody has a right to have any kind of level of superiority in a faith conversation at all. Because we all, except for the miraculous intervention of Jesus, are doomed. Doomed. We are unified in our desperation for God's grace and in his redemption. And that is the single fact that makes us all able to be together. Maybe you worry about the Bible. I don't know it. I don't know enough about it. You don't have to act like you do. Most of our small groups are sermon-based small groups. And so what they do is that they take what gets taught on a Sunday morning and they flesh it out into a small group discussion. So you could at least, even if you don't feel like you know a lot about the Bible, you could either, if you were here on Sunday or you could rewatch it online, you could be prepared for the group that week because you'll at least be an expert on what you heard and what you've been reading since then and how God's been moving in your heart as you heard it. Able to quickly participate. Lastly, third obstacle, accountability. Accountability. I know we don't like that word, but one of the things that keeps people from group or relationship is they know that if I do, I'm going to have a little pressure applied to my life. It's going to create some pressure. But you know what? Sometimes a little bit of pressure applied to us is what's required for us to grow. You ever been working out with a workout buddy, and you wake up one morning, because this inevitably happens, and you're like, I do not want to go in today. I don't want to go. I don't want to be I don't want to, but you know, like, oh, but they're going to be there. They're going to be there. And somehow that knowledge changes your entire approach to the conversation. And you find yourself getting up out of bed and going in and working out. And then what happens when you're done? Man, I'm so glad I did that. I almost didn't. But it was somebody else in your life who loved you, who wasn't going to beat you over the head if you didn't show up, but was also kind of a motivator to go like, let's grow in this. So small groups, week after week after week, we take sermon content and we start to press it into life. And it starts connecting to things like anxieties and worries and hardships and grief and struggles, parent issues, spouse issues, work issues, life issues. And all of a sudden, God's word starts to interact in a more regular way because we're talking about it. You're not just listening, but you're pressing into things a little bit with some detail. And you come back the next week, and there might even be follow-up conversation about it. Or if a similar verse comes up, you've got the history of a conversation in a group already, and there's some known history. And all the while, it starts to put some good pressure on all of us so that we take the steps that we actually want to take